Okay, great. Well, good morning, everyone. To those who are in India and surrounding areas. Good afternoon to Juan, who is out of Australia, and good evening to Mia and Iris and others who are joining in the evening hour. Thank you for joining this live webinar today. My name is Rajiv Burman, and along with Vikas Malhotra, I'm the co-founder of this company, Growth Source. This webinar will be for 90 minutes, and uh, like all our previous webinars, will be interactive. Please feel free to type in any questions that you have as you go along in the chat box. And Priya, who is helping me and is part of our business development team, she will consolidate these and raise them with Dawn through the session. As far as possible, keep yourself on mute. You can keep your videos on, and that'll be outstanding. So, a quick introduction to those who would be presenting today. Don Hammonds, he's a behavioral psychologist and a coach to leaders in many Fortune 500 companies. Don is an American based in Australia. Good afternoon, Don.
Good afternoon.
Iris Hainstock is an international success coach with special interest in neuroscience, brain based coaching, strengths based coaching, and heart based transformational coaching. She's based in Vancouver, Canada. Good evening, Iris. Tanya Yasenko,
Evening, everyone. Glad to have you here.
great. Tanya Yasenko is a certified executive and communication coach. She's also certified as a conversational intelligence or in conversational intelligence, complemented as a registered speech language pathologist. So,
Dawn, can you mute?
yeah, if you could just keep yourself on mute, we'll cut out the background noise, please. There you go. Thank you. So, I don't know if what I said I think I should repeat it. Tanya is a certified executive and communication coach. She's also certified in conversational intelligence, complemented as a registered speech language pathologist. So all three would be presenting today. We will, like I mentioned, post the recording of this webinar on our site, and you'll receive the link by tomorrow. You'll also receive a feedback questionnaire. This is the last of our 4 webinars that we had scheduled. There would be a certification program that we will talk about towards the end, but details on that would also be shared with everyone. But these webinars, this is the 4th and the final one in the series. Once again, thank you for joining us, and over to Don.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Rajiv, and welcome to everyone who is on board. So good morning to those of you who are in India. Good afternoon if we have some Malaysians in with us, and good evening to Iris and Tanya, who are well and truly in the middle of the night. Thank you so much for staying up or getting up to participate in this final webinar. As if those of you that have been on previous ones, we have been talking about how to improve or how to manage teams in these challenging times. And so as we wrap up with this series, adapting organizational leadership in times of the coronavirus can also be named just adapting leadership in times period. One of the things that I have been hearing and talking with colleagues around the world about is just the high level of stress and anxiety that is actually in all of us. And those of us that are more in tune to actually spend a great deal of time understanding how the stresses of the world, stresses of our daily lives, our activities actually influence us, we really try to move into an understanding of what are the factors that are affecting all of us and how are those factors influencing our behaviors and our decisions. So tonight will be about understanding some of these things that we have been discovering globally. We will be discovering some of the activities that the world is now doing, and some of the lessons that have been learned. So, this is going to be hopefully very interactive. So, there's only 6 slides tonight because I really want people to ask questions. This is the time for you to actually ask questions that are bothering you. And we have 3 excellent people, or 2 excellent people, I'm just a moderator at this point, to actually help guide you through some of the things that you're actually feeling. And here's the fun part: you're not alone. Globally, everybody is where you are today, and everybody else is where you are today. So, whether you're Australia, Canada, America, India, Malaysia, doesn't really matter. We're all experiencing the same level and the same types of stress. It's how we actually adapt to that stress, particularly in the terms of leadership. But it's extremely important that right now that people understand there are those of us who are here to help you. There are those of us who want to encourage you that we can get through this truly together. You may know people who have lost jobs or, been cut back on hours. All of these, things are as a result of something that was outside of all of our control. But yet we are going to experience the same pain. In Australia right now, there's just a high degree of mental anxiety that's going on. We have more abuse, spousal abuse, and the country has been willing to admit to. I'll put it like that. It's always been there, but now it's to the forefront with both spouses being home, children being home, and not really knowing how to communicate properly. So this is something that we are going to be talking about moving forward. And as leaders, how do you, as leaders, really influence and encourage your teams, your organization to keep moving, but not the way it was done yesterday? But how do we move forward knowing that all of us are suffering from the same type and types of anxiety? So, with that in mind, let's just jump into this, and please feel free to turn your cameras on so we can see everyone. And I'll get through these slides very quickly. But if you have any questions as I go through the slides, I want you to feel free to actually ask the question, and someone will pop the question in, and the 3 of us will answer it at the end. If there are no, I mean, as I go through this, if there are no questions, then we will most definitely open it up to Q&A. So bear with me for 15 minutes to bring some of this information to light, and then we'll really get into this. Okay, so as you know, for the past 4 months, that we all have been suffering from this global pandemic that none of us had anything to do with. And it has changed our lives. It has changed our business operations. It has changed businesses forever. Now, the good part to all of that is innovation is one of the things that are actually coming out of how do we do something different? And most businesses globally for the past 10 years have actually been wanting and looking to hire people that are very innovative. And now we get to use that natural ability to innovate in a positive way, both for our organizations and our businesses, but more importantly for ourselves. So we have to adopt a new agile way of doing work. We have to adopt a new agile way of actually communicating with each other. It was very sad. I went to get my coffee this morning, for example, and everyone is still kind of sort of panicking about, keeping a safe distance from one another. Look, I get that. But when you're going into a community space, it's going to be very difficult not to come in contact or not to violate the 1.5 meter rule. And what happened was that there was a man and a woman was coming in. I was had a coffee in one hand and had something else in my other hand, and it was clear that I was either going to have to put something down to open up the door. But as they were coming in, they saw me, saw my hands, but they didn't even show politeness to hold the door open for me. The door literally nearly closed, and the expression on my face, anyone who saw it told the story. And people who were coming in and saw this kind of said, "Oh, I'm sorry for you. That was very rude and that shouldn't have happened." But that is the thing that's actually on the increase, is that people are more concerned about themselves than other people. But if you're going to be in a community situation, we got to be concerned about each other. Open the door. Smiling changes everything. There's a paper that I'm almost done with. It's called The Value of a Smile. You'd be surprised how much and how powerful an actual real smile is versus a fake smile. So we have to be able to do things differently. And I think going back to basics, just being able to smile is one of those things that we can do for another human being just to let them know they are okay. So here we are after months of lockdown, work from home mandates, and all these other wonderful things that we've now had to create. We are beginning to now finally relax some of the restrictions that we've actually placed on people. But some of these restrictions are going to have led to better questions or bigger questions or questions in general that we didn't have just 4 months ago. So, the impact of a crisis on the business operations and leadership is one of those things. How has this affected your operation? How has this affected your leadership? How has this affected you personally? That's a question that you need to ask yourself, because we don't live in a vacuum. What affects you in India, believe it or not, affects us in Australia, affects us in North America, and vice versa, because we all feel the same level of stress. What are some of the opportunities and challenges facing, basic talent development from this perspective? What are some of the challenges and opportunities that are facing leadership, for example? So, how is leadership going to change? How is your personal leadership going to change? And it's not just so much about this coronavirus crisis, but organizations have crises every day. And the brain helps you navigate through the crises, but most of us never really pay attention to the cycle of events or the cycle of words that you actually use in order to effectively deal with that crisis. So, have any of you developed a contingency plan, particularly for your remote workers and your work at home teams? Are you going to continue to allow work at home operations? Because some of the data is coming back demonstrating that we can actually do a pretty good job working from home. And I kind of like that, that we're now seeing this situation before our eyes. I mean, I was one of the vanguards from working from home, many years ago, because I got tired of going into the office, and I was actually more productive at home than I was actually in the office because I had too many distractions in the office. So, what are some of the things that you are going to do? What are some of the contingency plans that you as an organization, you as a leader, are actually bringing forward? So, some of the things that we have come up globally with is how to convert from an in office to a virtual meeting solution. This has been kind of interesting because it's actually turned into somewhat of a bad situation. Unfortunately, it's called Zoom syndrome, because you spend more time on Zoom than you actually do in getting your work done. Uh, but how are you going to do that? If you're going to allow work from home employees to stay at home maybe 1, 2, 3 days a week or wherever the case may be, how are you going to manage your meetings? We all get burnt out from meetings because we all know meetings are not that productive. There's been study after study after study over the past 15, 20 years to show how ineffective meetings actually are. You don't always have to have a meeting. Maybe you have a meeting at the beginning of the week and at the end of the week. If there's an emergency, you pop a meeting in, you deal with that. But meetings really should not go on pretty much longer than 30 minutes. You get in, say what you need to say. If it's a team environment, let them do their reports and move on to square two, which is let them get back to doing their work. Why? Because the brain itself loves a routine. So, in a non routine environment where individuals are working from home, and for many people, this is brand new. So, they don't know, okay, so the dog's there, so the dog walks up, or the cat walks up, or the child comes home. Well, now kids are going back to school in most Western countries. I don't know about there in India, but kids are fully back in school, I think, as of coming up on Monday. So, they don't have that distraction, but maybe they have the distraction of not putting on a suit and tie, maybe not going to brush their teeth or take a shower as they would if they were actually going into the office. So certain things are going to have to change if there's going to be this work from home model. And if, as an organization, you allow this or you say, okay, this is what we're going to do, then you're also going to have to bring in some helpful tips, not mandates, but helpful tips to help them navigate a new environment so that they can also be very productive. Are you going to communicate effectively, or how are you going to communicate effectively with your teams? How are business leaders going to effectively communicate with each other, particularly if you have to do it via Zoom or some other telecommunication device? How are you progressing down this road? Are you being successful? Is your communication releasing cortisol, or is your communication releasing oxytocin? If you have a cortisol induced communication style and conversation, then that person is going to tune you out, and it won't be very pleasant, because if they're at home, many people are going to say, well, I'm at home, you can't interfere with what I'm doing at home. Yes, that is true, but work still has to be done. So, as leaders, we have to find a more effective way of communicating. I was talking with someone, and I forgot who it was, about one of the lessons I personally, well, not personally, but I've been helping a few um, patients through. And that is, and please forgive if this seems rude to you there in India, but the paper was about how to make love to your wife just by saying hello. And the importance of that was not the sexual activity, but it was the thing that leads up to it, which is saying hello. How simple and easy is it to wake up in the morning and say hello? Now, I don't think you need to. You probably might want to go brush your teeth and get all the night germs out of your mouth before you say hello, because that can be offensive to some people. But imagine if you are conducting a meeting and you don't even say hello. You just kind of jump into it. And that's one of the claims here in Australia. You can walk up to someone in a service industry and they won't really say hello from a transformative perspective. They will actually say hello from a transactional perspective. Hello, what can I get for you? What's that about? Your brain will actually respond to that. And even though if you grew up in an environment where that is part of the process, you may not respond to it as readily as someone else. But I guarantee you, if someone actually takes their time and says, good morning, Rajiv, how are you doing? And they actually slow down, or they say, hey, Priya, you know what? Wow, what you said 20 minutes ago was fantastic. Thank you for saying that. It will literally rewire your brain in a split second, because that person just released large amounts of oxytocin in your brain. So communication is important. And luckily tonight we have on a speech pathologist who specializes in communication. So hopefully you guys will have some questions for her. So, and we also want to get into some of the lessons learned from other businesses globally? What have they been doing to actually change or learn how to adapt themselves in this new environment? Now, as I said, there's only 6 slides. So what I'm going to go back to, I'm going to go back to, where's the slide at here? So I want to start the Q&A session with what has the impact been on some of you that you've noticed within your organizations. So let's open it up. Priya, were there any questions prior to uh, me opening this up now?
Not really, Don. But however, there is a question that I have, and I would wish to ask here, which is basically that in these tough business times, have led to pay cuts and layoffs in some areas. So, as business leaders or HR leaders, one of the most difficult conversation to have is about any kind of negative news. How to handle such conversations, and would a warm smile or hello play any role out here?
I'm going to say yes, but I'm actually going to throw this over to Tanya. Tanya, are you there?
Yes. Hi. Thank you. I've just unmuted.
Would you like to take that question?
Sure. That would be great. Thank you, Don. You're right. It's having difficult conversations is always a challenge. So let's see it from a two-pronged point of view. Is that whenever I look at behavior is something we do. This is waving behavior. I'm engaging in talking behavior. Behavior is an action we do, something we engage in. And when I look at communication, is that I always look at it from both a proactive and a reactive point of view. What am I doing from the front end to establish a trusting relationship? So that, and that very proactively. So when I'm giving any kind of news, and we're having transactions and we're exchanging of information, we're building trust. So that when I have to be reactive and give difficult information, that there's already a trust there. So that's from the back end. Is that as a bigger picture is looking at conversations both as building trust proactively and continuing to build trust even reactively when that bad news has to be delivered. However, we've been in shock. We've definitely been in shock, and we've all had to pivot. If we look at Uber was a disruptor, we've had many industries that have disrupted our organizations. Well, COVID-19 has also been a disruptor, a huge disruptor. And we have to react very reactively. We have to respond, I should say, very reactively. So let's start with a warm smile, okay? And hello plays a role. So where is that warm smile coming from? That is my first question. Studies have actually shown out of the University of Buffalo, including, and they have been duplicated at the University of Pennsylvania in the US, that a fake smile has actually led to that people who've been forced to put on fake smiles have been forced to actually, the result has been an increase of drinking alcohol. So that tells me that these warm smiles are not coming from a place of authenticity. And one of my favorite quotes is that your energy will introduce you before you've even said a word. So your warm smile, your intent may be that you might be wanting to put on a warm smile. Your impact, that's not what's being communicated. So I'm just looking at the question again. So the question was that a warm smile play. Well, of course, anytime we're communicating with anybody, whether it's good news or bad news or neutral news, of course, a warm smile is very important, but it really has to come from a place of connectivity and trust.
Got it, Tanya. I think that explains a lot. So I think supplementing to this question is With this, we've spoken about how business leaders would handle it. Can you just shed some light that how should the receiving end manage it? How should they control the cortisol flowing profusely within them?
Look, I love that. That's yes. How do they control the cortisol flowing through them?
Yes.
I just worked for one of the largest. Uh, well, she worked for Canadian Post, and she was in management, and so she's experienced a lot of cortisol during her time there. So, Iris, would you like to tackle this one? Turn your mic on. There you go.
There we go. So Priya, I just want to clarify the question. Are you talking as if, okay, now I'm the person, I'm in the room and I'm going to receive bad news. How should I react? Or I think I'm going to receive bad news. Is that how you were phrasing the question?
So my whole thing was I have already received the bad news. So
Ah,
I've been informed by the management about some either pay cuts or layoffs. So
right.
the management has done their job, but at the receiving end, there is definitely a pain, whatever said and done, despite the trust, whatever. So,
Right.
what should be, how should the receiving end manage it?
Well, of course, human nature and the brain is going to go to shock because if you weren't expecting it, then you're already in that state of shock. So, depending on your emotional intelligence, will kind of predict how you're going to react and how you're going to manage this. So, in an ideal situation, if I'm the person receiving, excuse me, receiving the bad news, and I'm an empathetic person, I don't want to spread that bad news in the workplace. I also don't want to spread it to my family. But if I'm not that emotionally intelligent and I'm in a state of shock, and I actually haven't practiced how I'm going to manage myself in times of crisis, I probably won't react very well. If I was able to not be in shock and not be triggered, I would want to remain calm and try to keep my cortisol levels down and think that, okay, so this door is closing, another door is going to open. That's the positive side. This is all happening for a reason, I would tell myself. So if I was, had that training, if I had those experiences, if I had set that intention that that's what I wanted to do, I would do that. But that's not usually how the situation happens. And the person goes back to the workplace, they're either in tears, they're going to start complaining, they're going to possibly blow it out of proportion, they're going to be very emotional, and they're going to spread that in the rest of the workplace. So, how the message is delivered and what you do with that person once you've delivered the message is really important.
Yeah, thanks for that,
Iris,
Iris.
may I add something?
Yeah.
Building on what Iris said, I believe, has Dawn spoken to you about the ladder of conclusion?
Yes,
Yes, as we go up that ladder of conclusion, when cortisol is then running, very freely through our bodies. So what we want to do is we want to do that reframe. And what strategies have I put into place proactively so that now I'm going up the ladder of possibilities? Right away with that reframe, I'm thinking about opportunities, possibilities, options. And and that is one way for that self-regulatory to mitigate the cortisol that's now flowing and to balance it off with some oxytocin. Because as soon as the brain starts thinking about possibilities, we are now releasing in ourselves the oxytocin.
Yep. Well said.
Yeah, I think another perspective on this would be Priya and everyone else is for the leader who has to deliver this bad news is to set an expectation. You're going to give bad news. You probably know you're going to give bad news a few days before. that you should also prepare yourself to be extremely empathetic. And when you begin this conversation should be very, very, very tender, frankful, but you must set an expectation. Let that person know that they are valued, because the minute that someone gets removed or is going to lose their job, it doesn't matter about the circumstances that leads to it. It's about what's going on and you knowing what's going on inside their brain. You get fired, your sense of connection is lost, your self-esteem is in jeopardy, your orientation and control has just been wiped out. And that is where the ladder of conclusion really comes in at, because at the base of the ladder of conclusion is conversation. How you deliver that information, and it is the quality of the information that will determine the bioreactions, that will determine the emotions, that will determine whether or not you make something up. It will determine whether you become so fearful. And on the emotional wheel, there are 8 basic emotions, but in fear is one of them, but fear is broken down into about 16 component parts. And mild frustration is actually fear and anger. As a leader, you must understand the impact of what you're going to say. You must also anticipate what's going to happen in that person's brain. And if you have a warm look to you, not a fake one, but a warm look to you, that person is already going to pick up there's something wrong. And as long as you slow your speech down and you're not talking so fast, again, I don't care what part of the world you come from, when bad news is being delivered and you deliver it at a pace that is not appropriate, that person doesn't believe you, and that person is going to be even more hurt. So leadership should also understand that there is a impact of what's going to happen. You need to anticipate that when you know you're going to have to let someone go, and you should know, you should play it over in your head what you're going to say. Now, that's the hard part. Here's the easy part. For those of you that may have to do that, you have 3 people that will walk you through it. Myself, Tanya, and Iris. We will walk you through how to prepare for that level of conversation. Okay? All right. Priya, back over to you.
Well, this is really great. It has really helped in shedding a lot of light on how to handle these conversations and how to manage your own emotions. This is really great. So I would request team members any questions. I haven't seen anything in the chat box yet.
Priya, while we're waiting for questions to come in, from a language and communication point of view, I'd like to actually continue to build on something Dawn said.
Okay, you're waiting for questions. I don't have any questions out here right now, Tanya.
No, on the previous topic about delivering difficult news. So Dawn actually talked about the rate of speech, and I want to add pausing, because what happens is that when we're getting an information dump, whether it's good news or bad news, if we're getting a lot of information, we need to process that information. Okay, so right away we are receiving, if we're getting an information dump, we need to take time to process it. And knowing that it's difficult information to take in and process, if we can slow down our rate of speech, it shows a little bit more intentionality and it shows presence. That's what we're communicating. Additionally, by pausing, because it doesn't matter if information is when we're receiving information, if it's emotional information, we need time to process it. and we need extra time to process it and to digest it and make sense of it if we have that moment, that pause to take it all in. But if that information continuously keeps being dumped on us, we're not processing and more information is coming in, and the cortisol just keeps building and building and building. So that pause is an incredibly powerful strategy where you're communicating, I'm here, I'm present, I'm with you on this journey. We're going to tease out this information together. I'm here as a support. So in Canada, as you know, Canada is such an incredible multilingual. We don't say English as a second language anymore, because a lot of people who live in Canada now, their English is actually not their second language. It could be their third, fourth, or even fifth. So we call them ELL. So just like when you're learning any language, you need time to process it. So the pause is just an incredibly powerful tool to say, I'm giving you space to take in this information.
That's really interesting. Absolutely. Now, when I listen to it, it probably makes a lot more sense, and it probably encourages a two-way communication and an interaction rather than single direction
Yes.
loading of information. That's incredibly great. Okay,
Because
so,
at the end of the day, what is communication? It really is an exchange of energy. Like you said, it's bi-directional. Exactly. And so in addition, the pause also does that. Thank you for bringing it up. It basically says, I'm giving you the space to respond. And responding could be either I'm processing the information or I'm going to take my turn to speak out loud.
great. So we have one more question from Debbie. And the question is, how do you support small business owners where the current grace period is over for payment of debts and they are overwhelmed?
Hi, Debbie. Can you say that one more time, please?
How do small business owners where the current grace period is over for the payment of their debts and they are in
How
an overwhelmed state? Yes. So small business owners and the grace period for paying their debts is kind of over.
okay, so is the question, how do you emotionally manage that?
No, Debbie is a coach, Dawn, and so she's wondering, how do you support those clients that are small business
Oh,
owners?
oh,
Yes.
okay. All right. Okay. Thanks, Debbie. Thanks for your question. I'm going to let Iris lead off with this one because she got it and I didn't. So I'll let the coach take this one, and then I'll probably come back in from a neuroscience perspective. So take it away, Iris.
Hi, Debbie. So I too coach small business people, and what they want, they know you can't fix the problem. So you're right in using the word support. And what they need is someone who can help ground them and someone who can help them with their resilience. They can make better decisions, because when you're under that amount of stress, the brain can't do the processing and can't make good decisions. So your job as a coach is to provide that grounding, help them reframe, and help to bring more more oxytocin to the situation by helping them see the positives, even in however small they might be. So their businesses are going to change. They're going to have to find another way to pay the debt. You just need to give them that space to talk about it, not be judged, hear it out loud, help them with their resilience, and hold that space for them. That help?
Yeah. And I think one of the things too, Debbie, is for you to understand what is going on in their brain. The overriding emotion will be fear. There will be large amounts of anxiety. And the anxiety comes from a very simple word, which is called uncertainty. If you are uncertain, there's going to be natural frustration and fear. That means that there are four reciprocal psychological needs every human being on the planet has to have. Number one is the need for connection and attachment. Number two is the need for orientation and control. Number three is the need for, what was number three? Orientation and control, attachment, the need for self-esteem. And then number four is that the brain's overarching principle is to find pleasure, not the hedonistic pleasure, but to be safe, be in a comfortable environment. So when you're actually coaching a person, you should understand those four reciprocal psychological needs that have been proven for the past 40 years that we all go through. We start our attachment literally physically when we are in the womb. When egg and sperm come together, there is a physical attachment. That's why babies like to cry so much. We like to say it's because it's cold. No, because they've just been detached for some person that they've actually been attached to for the previous 9 months. Our orientation and control is out of order. Think of orientation as you buying your house, and think of how you decorate your home. That is the control within it. Think of and now that leads to the self-esteem aspect of it. If a person has to face certain realities, I've lost clients, I've lost money, and you can't pay, then you're going to have that wonderful conversation with the bank manager or the loan officer, and they're going to the client is going to have to express where they really are. You can actually help them by them setting the expectation. You set the expectation within them, they set the expectation within the manager by understanding those four needs. And also, their self esteem is going to be ruined. Self esteem gives us certain protection. Tanya and I were also talking about that earlier today, and one of those protections, it's probably not the best protection, but there is a protection of entitlement. If you're doing well in business or you're starting out, you're very excited, you're ready to rah rah, everything is going to go great, and then all of a sudden you get hit in the face by something that you were not anticipating. You just lost your entitlement because you just lost your self-esteem, you just lost some of your protection, you just lost some of your connection, you just lost your orientation and control. As a coach, part of your responsibility is to help people set proper expectations. And I can tell you right now, over the next 4 to 6 months, you're going to be very busy, especially if you help people understand what's happening with them emotionally and what's going on in their brain. And right now is the time to actually explain what's happening in their brain, because there is evidence to support from um, University of Pennsylvania, um, Stanford University, and Ohio State that when a person understands what's happening in their brains, they actually respond differently. As a coach, you actually are practicing neuroplasticity. You are helping a person change the physical structure of their brain. You're helping them lay down new neural tracks and develop new connections and new neurons about something that they didn't know. So even when you begin to talk to them about some of this, it is new neurons are being formed, and those connections will get stronger, and in turn they actually become more stronger. And I believe the word is called empowerment. And when they are empowered, it doesn't matter about what's going to happen tomorrow, because you got them focused on today. You got them to understand what's happening in their brain. You got them to understand if you release too much cortisol, you're not going to be able to think. As a leader, let me tell you, I'll tell you right now from personal experience and from working with some very, very high, well known top executives in Google, Apple, Facebook, Bank of America, Wells Fargo Bank. Those are all the places I used to play with. Let me tell you something. When these top C-suiters get into trouble because there's too much cortisol being released, they can't function well. Microsoft is the greatest example because for 10 years, when Steve Ballmer was in charge, he did some very terrible things to his employees. And that's why Microsoft lost its market dominance, was because of the games that he had other people playing on his teams. They've come back slowly, but they lost their market share. Well, we can zero that down to ourselves. What do we tell ourselves? What's our internal story? So help your client understand what's happening within their brain. They will be able to navigate the rough waters that are going to be there. And that's another thing. Just be honest with people too. Let them know rough days are ahead. This is not the time to coddle this. This is the time to be honest and be truthful. And you will garner a lot of trust. And if you haven't attended any of our previous webinars, we do have a wonderful little fact sheet on what trust actually is and is not.
Don, I love the word transparency. About being transparent, because there's so often people will know or people will sense when we're withholding information, right? And if there's information, and oftentimes we won't admit that there's information we don't know. We'll say, this is what we know, and they'll ask us about other information. If we don't have that information, we often dodge it, we redirect it. So just coming back to, again, using our language, if there's information that we don't know, one way to stay very transparent about it and say, this is what I know, and this is actually what I don't know yet. And just even by adding that word yet, you're actually saying, I'm admitting I don't know it yet, but I'm hoping to get the information. And as soon as I have it, I'm hoping to then deliver it to you. So just by admitting that this is what I know and this is what I don't know, you're being transparent. And then by adding that word yet, it means you're hoping it's yet to come. And that is one way with your language and through transparency is to self-regulate your own communicative behavior towards co-regulating the conversation.
Well done. Thank you. Iris, I think you had a question. Uh-oh, there's another question. Sorry. Someone did have a question. Priya, I'll turn it back over to you right quick. Priya?
Don, can I speak?
Yes, you may.
Okay, thank you. Don, I raised a question on whether one can push some oxytocin into an employee's brain when he already has an overdose of cortisol.
How do you push or how do you influence the release of oxytocin when someone already has an overload of cortisol? I like that question. Thank you very much. And look, I'm going to tell you the truth, how to do this. Let that person go decompress, because nothing that you're going to say is going to release any amount of oxytocin, because when you're already upset, there is nothing another person can say. You can't even say, I'm sorry, because that's when the passive aggressive behavior comes out. You're going to hear, well, I'm sorry. Well, you should be sorry. Well, okay, yes. And then now you're in that, position that you don't really need to be in. If a person is upset, you have to take the reins and you have to say, hey, listen, I want to work through this with you. However, I need you to go and walk away for 20 minutes. Now, let me tell you why that's important. Cortisol stays in your blood system for up to 20 minutes. Oxytocin stays in your blood system 30 seconds. So if they're upset, nothing that you're going to say is going to release the oxytocin. They have to calm down on their own. Don't say, go calm down, because that's going to release more cortisol, because we all don't want to be told to do that. Just let them know, hey, listen, I want to work through this with you. However, I need you to go and just have a walk for 20 minutes. Because what will happen after they're taking that walk and when they come back, the physical release of endorphins after they've taken a walk, it will calm them down naturally. So the endorphins that are floating around now in their system is automatically calming them down. And when they come back, now you can have a trustful communication with that person. You don't need to ask, how are you feeling? You don't need to say anything that is going to trigger them because they're just under the radar at that point. And you can now ask them, how can we work together on solving this situation? Now, if it's a case where someone has been fired, that's going to be completely different. I would suggest if someone is being let go, that you give them space to talk, because what we have discovered in the United States of America with all of our mass shootings, where people, particularly during that terrible period in the late 80s, early 90s, and even into the early 2000s, where people were literally going into their office places and killing people, is because they were let go in a very untrustworthy manner. They were not given space to talk. They were just, nope, you're fired, see you, goodbye. As Tanya said, there was no space to process this information. Imagine, we process 1 million bits of information per second. You heard me say that. 1 million bits of information per second. We can only concentrate on 3 to 4 of them. So when you've just told someone they've been fired, still 1 million bits of information, their heart rate just went up, cortisol levels just went up. Cortisol, neoepinephrine, epinephrine, adrenaline also jumped into the picture, which now shuts down the prefrontal cortex so they cannot think properly. In the case where you have not had to let someone go, and it is a behavioral problem, or it is a problem with working together in a unit, same process. 1 million bits of information, you may only focus on 3 to 4. And those 3 to 4 will be the things that they see that is coming at them from a brain perspective. Again, loss of self-esteem, loss of connection, loss of orientation and control. And now they become addicted to being angry or being frustrated. So you have got to be the person that will understand this and know going in, if you're going to have a difficult conversation, you need to be prepared for what that conversation is going to entail. What is the intent of the conversation, and what is the impact you actually want to have within that conversation? You cannot do it if a person is already angry and or upset. You have to let them know, hey, listen, I need you to go take a walk, or let's go take a walk, or let's go have a cup of coffee. Whatever it is, give them 20 minutes, because remember this, as I told you earlier, cortisol stays into your system up to 20 minutes. And if you go back and you start to repeat what happened, you're releasing the cortisol all over again. That's why when people start yelling at each other, literally the muscles in your ears shut down so you can't hear. So, and every time it's repeated within that very short time period, it's cortisol on top of cortisol on top of cortisol, because the brain is going to remember what actually happened. So now you got to be in a position where you understand this, you know this, so you do something different. You deflect by saying, hey, let's go have a cup of coffee. If that's not going to work, say, hey, listen, I need to go have a quick 20-minute break. You be the big person here. I need to have a 20-minute break before we actually get into this. You take your 20 minutes, because their 20 minutes is bringing them down. And then when you come back, then you can say something like, what can we do to resolve this issue? Iris, I see you there. You got any insights?
Yeah, the other thing to be prepared for in these conversations is to have some options and resources for the person. So that is actually giving them back some control. Having choices and options is a way to give a person control. And of course, when you deliver bad news, suddenly their control is gone. So it's important to have, like Dawn said, that space and a place to talk and someone to talk to, but also give them some options and resources. Even if you're letting them go, there's still options and resources that would be available to them from the community, from the government, from social services, from work placement places, whatever it is, there would be resources that you can offer. And in this crisis type time, you don't want someone, like Dawn said, coming back and shooting someone. You also don't want to push someone over the edge that may go home and abuse someone else, and you don't want suicide on your hands either.
John, if I,
Uh,
Ashok, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm Ashok here again. So I did have the situation of someone being fired, and I heard, I would say that one could opt for some choices, some options. Now, another thought process that is going on in me is, uh, would it be useful after the 20-minute break when the employee has calmed down? Would it be useful to be authentic and communicate the choices that I, as the boss, had, and that I made a choice and the reason for making a choice? Or would you suggest that you give him some more time and then communicate the need for a choice? I took a choice, I stand by my choice.
Right. Um, can you define what you mean by being authentic?
Okay, let's say that there was a situation brewing within the organization. It could be a takeover, a merger, acquisition, whatever. So there was some insight available to me, and
Dal.
once a decision was taken, there was a need to downsize. So when I say that I'm being authentic, I would probably at various levels talk about uh, the process of merging or acquiring and so on, and that there would be some role changes, some decisions would have to be taken which would impact the organizational structure and so on. So, in other words, without stating something specific, I'm actually preparing the ground for people to realize that there could be something, you know, which would drive up the cortisol levels of a number of people. This is a very authentic way, is what I'm saying, is I'm being truthful to myself. If I have made a choice, then I'm at peace with myself because I believe that I made the right choice.
Okay, thank you for that. I just wanted to know what you meant by authenticity, because it is a word that it gets used a lot and has been used a lot, I would say, over the past 25 years, and it's actually been watered down. So I just wanted to hear your um, frame of mind, what you meant by that. And yes, I think being authentic is absolutely important. I also think it's important to, even in a case where you've got to let someone go, you still have to develop trust. And we've given an acronym for trust. And the first T stands for transparency, and what that actually means. So, part of that transparency is that if you're known to be an authentic um, manager of people, then right on. What we want to move into over the next few months and hopefully beyond that is where we can actually develop transformational trust, or even transformational authenticity. And there are some ways of actually understanding that. One of which is the R in trust stands for relationship. What type of relationship do I have with this person? What type of relationship do I want to have with this person? What type of relationship is possible with this person, even if you have to let them go? All too often, I'd say over the past 40 years, there's only one CEO that I know of who's had to fire people that's actually friends with the people he's actually fired. And he just passed away not too long ago. His name was Jack Welch from GE Capital. When Jack was the guru to turn to for upper management, C-suite leadership styles, Jack literally would tell people, you know what? You have to show people hope. You have to show people what he called a truism or being true. And you also have to show what shared success looks like, even if you have to let that person go. So when it comes to how you are being authentic, when it comes to that individual's emotional mindset, you've got to, under relationship, you got to stand in their shoes, knowing what you have to say is going to separate them. So the connection is now lost. And remember, more than 85% of the working population globally, their sense of identity is tied to their job. And that's pretty sad, because that means they don't have a life outside their job. They get up and they go to work and they work, and they don't really have a life. So you as a leader should understand what's going on inside their brain when you have to deliver this bad news. If there's a merger and it benefits you as a business owner, you have to make that call. Great, no problem, and no one can fault you for that. But also as a business owner, and this is what the world is now becoming to understand, is that you need to know what's going on inside the brain of your employees. You don't have to know a lot of it, just enough to understand and how to navigate the emotional minefield, because most people are going to respond emotionally.
Oh, good man. Say, quotation मिळालं मला.
I just want to add to what
कमर्शियल मला समजलं त्याप्रमाणे एक लाईन आयटम आहे जो 8,000 पर 500 GB हार्ड डिस्क तो फिक्स असेल.
I just want to add to what
दुसरा लाईन
Don
आयटम
was
वन
saying.
वर्किंग डे 4,500 पर डे म्हटलेलं आहे. तर 4,500 पर डे आणि नंबर ऑफ डेज लागतील त्याप्रमाणे ते वाढत जाईल असं आहे का? 10 दिवस लागले तर 45,000 थोडक्यात.
Someone with the name
45,000 plus
Rajiv was having a conversation in the
अंदाजे ह्या
background.
कामाला किती दिवस लागतील तुमच्या मते?
Someone's having a conversation.
मला फक्त त्यांनी कॉपी केलंय का नाही, आणि कॉपी केलं असेल तर
Are you able to mute
कुठला
that
डेटा
person?
कॉपी केलाय आणि त्याचं स्क्रीनशॉट लागेल.
I would request other participants to please mute their microphone. Okay, so we have one more question from Mr. Ashish. There is a question from Ashish, and it goes like, how will it affect others if we show a modulated momentary shift in our approach? How to mix sympathy with normal emotions? And in addition to that, he has that if you could give your opinion about prioritizing between business emotions and personal emotions in the current situation of irrationality and uncertainty.
4,500 plus 8,000 असं करतो. हा GST काय असेल ते.
Can I request Mr. Rajiv, can you please mute yourself?
Alan?
Okay, there we go. Got it. Iris, you want to take this question?
Let me know if you want me to repeat the question.
No, I can read it here. So Just let me get back to it because I wasn't expecting it to come my way. So what I wanted to add to what Dawn said before, which kind of starts to address this question, is that how you deal with this one person that you're letting go or firing or whatever it is, how you do it also influences the rest of it, and it sets a mindset, it sets emotions on because whatever you say to that person in that room, they have relationships with other employees. And so they're going to tell their story, however they may embellish it, the feelings that they put into it, and actually what they heard from, their own ladder of conclusion, what they actually think they heard. And so it's really important that you have a good delivery of the message and that the rest of the employees see how their colleagues are being treated. That's what I wanted to add. But now you're saying, how will it affect others if we show modulated, momentary shift in our approach and how to mix sympathy with normal emotions? Was there more to that?
No, I guess that was it.
Okay. So I guess if you've already established how you deal with things, and if there has been no emotion, and if there has been no relationships, and if there's just been business, and it's going to be difficult in a situation where you have to let someone go to change that. But of course, you have to start somewhere. So you're right, there is a balance between the empathy, but there's also bringing the humanity into it, and to, as a leader, having some kind of relationships beyond just the work environment with your employees. It's good to know a bit about them and ask about their interests from time to time, and know that this person enjoys football and that person enjoys flower arranging or things like that. It's good to know that they spend time with their family and go on picnics or go on vacations, or that they have someone at home that they're taking care of. It doesn't have to be in-depth type of relationship, but it's good to know what's happening in your employees' lives, because then you're showing an interest, and that changes their perspective of where they work, how they're valued. Does that answer the question for you, or did I not get the mark?
Ashish, in case there are any further questions pertaining to this, you could ask them directly. And if it answers your question.
Yeah, and Tanya, did you have something to say about this? Tanya? Did we lose Tanya?
Here we go. Hello. Hello. Yes, it's actually something that it's building on relationship building. So one of the things I will admit, one of the biggest things that I've struggled with is the amount of change that has occurred within the last 2 months. Because if we look at normal skill acquisition, we learn, we're going up, and then we need a moment of consolidation. And then the rules of engagement change again. There may be shifts. We learn again, and then we need another moment of consolidation. And I'm finding that I haven't been having my moments of consolidation. And I pride myself on change happening I'm very adaptable to change. And I'm sick of change right now because it's happening, it's pivoting, it's changing. And I need some time for consolidation for that cortisol to come back. So whether you're giving information because you're firing something, or the rules of engagement, or how we're going to show up the next day for work are going to change, people are going to complain. And I'm finding this on social media, the amount of complaining, and it's driving me nuts. However, I realize that complaining and venting is part of the process. And what I'd like to do is offer you a suggestion on how to build a relationship, but to allow venting and complaining to happen, and I guess in as a healthy way as possible. Because people were going to have to vent and complain, but you don't want to add fuel to that fire. And oftentimes we'll engage in behaviors of explaining or justifying or coming up with solutions. And most times when people are venting or complaining, we're going to do a fill in the blank. When people are venting and complaining, it's because they want to be heard. So before saying, okay, why don't we take a 20-minute break? If in that moment someone really has to get something off their chest, they've just been fired, or they're frustrated because changes happen again. A great language strategy to be present and to communicate and have that two-way conversation is to use the strategy yes and. And however you communicate, yes, I hear you, and you're basically saying, give me more information. But I'm just saying, I'm hearing you. Continue. I'm still present for you. I'm still listening. Continue. So the yes and is a great strategy to remain neutral. And you're communicating that I'm listening, but you're not adding to any of their cortisol. And by your presence, by communicating your presence and that you're listening, you just might be adding a little bit of oxytocin. Because when people feel heard, that's when oxytocin can then start flowing. And then, just like any child who's having a temper tantrum, we all exhaust ourselves. And it's when you see that de-escalation coming down and that exhaustion of venting or complaining, at that point in time, that's when you can then say, hey, why don't we take a 20-minute break, a 10-minute break? Let's just go for a walk, either together or separate, and regroup. So that's a proactive strategy when somebody is really in that amygdala hijack and is venting or complaining. A great way to stay present, to communicate your listening, to not add fuel to the fire, and allow them the space, is the yes and. I hear you, and yes, and however you want to communicate yes.
Yeah, thanks for that, Tanya. I think one step that may make this more clear. Tanya and I practice a brain-based methodology that actually seeks for more information. And what we do is say, can you share more with me? So if you were on one of our previous webinars, I had a communication matrix out. And the communication matrix starts, most people are very closed off, reserved. They don't want to share a lot of information. And our job is to move them into what we call co-creative or co-creation. And part of that is when someone is actually, you can sense, and we all can sense what's going on. We have a neural net that sits over our heart that was discovered in the 1940s, and literally just a couple of years ago, we've come to understand what that neural net is for, and it is for emotional learning. That's how come you can feel someone else's anger and frustration and joy and happiness. But part of standing in the other person's shoes under trust for relationship is to seek more information. It's difficult for a newborn to express verbally what they want. That's why they scream and yell and do all these other things that some adults still do. It's because they haven't learned how to effectively communicate. And so and my dad used to do this with me, he would say, son, I hear you, but tell me more. Now imagine from the age of 7 up through 17, I got hit with, son, I hear you, but tell me more. I finally figured out what the tell me more was meant to do. My father also was a psychologist. The tell me more was meant to tire me out. It was to remove all the oxygen so I can't burn anymore. Because if a person, when they're actually given an opportunity to be in there or sit there, you show your willingness to hear them. Don't do one of these numbers. Don't do this. And don't do this. And don't pick up your phone and don't look at your watch. Let that person vent and then ask them, can you clarify that for me, please? Or can you tell me more? And you say it from a loving perspective. There was a song. It's called What the World Needs Now Is Love, 1966. Guess what? It's not a bad thing, but we make it like it's some mysterious, willy foo foo, marshmallow, touchy feely thing. Where do you think we all come from? Touchy feely. So let's ask them to tell you more, particularly when they're venting. If you want them to deep vent, ask them to tell you more. Now, there was a question about someone wanting my opinion about prioritizing between business emotions and personal emotions. So, whoever asked that question, can you please define what are business emotions, please?
Yeah,
That was Ashish.
I'm
Yes.
Ashish here.
Hi, Ashish.
I'm
How are you?
Ashish. I'm good, thank you. I'm very happy to listen to you people. Moreover, my question was both my questions were addressing to something which current situation we are addressing to is non-linear uncertain conditions. And we people are habitual of establishing linearity or certainty in relations depends on our database. Now, considering a serious and very unpredictable non-linearity situation, I just wanted to know, and you answered it very nicely, that we need to have more database available with us to really establish a linear relation with a person to whom we are communicating, and that will suffice our need as such. And when I say business emotion and personal emotions, I mean it is a commercial aspect and humility. So to balance these two together, you have answered it very nicely here before also, but I would like to know from you more, how do we balance between this commercial emotions or expectations and personal relations and emotions? Am I clear to you, sir?
Yes, yes, you're very clear.
Thank
So
you.
I'm going to give you a very simple and straightforward answer.
Please.
From a scientific and from a psychological perspective, we don't have business emotions. There are 8 universal emotions that we all revolve around, and they sit on the surface.
Please.
So a person is not in business and he or she has separate emotions for their business, and then they have separate emotions when it comes to personal or interpersonal relationships. The emotions are going to be the same. If I'm angry because something didn't go well within my business, there is no linear line that says, well, this is related to the business and this is related to personal. For example, a few years ago, I owned a large telecommunications company here in Australia. And one of the competitors didn't like the fact that I actually had the same software system that they had that actually came from America. And I happened to have met the CEO, told him what was going on, and they weren't using the software to actually help serve the people. He listened to my story. He said, "And tell me more, tell me more." And after he got me to tell him more, he said, "Listen, I'm going to give you a shot." So I negotiated a literally a $30 million software. I didn't have to pay anything for the next 4 months. The competitor found out, and he told one of the other groups that I needed to provide the security not to give me something that I needed in order to provide security for mobile phones. I had a young man fly in from Ireland to our data center, set up our system in 4 days, and we were ready to have voice calls on mobile phones and physical calls on the phones. But because this individual told another individual slow walk it, it took them 6 weeks to set up the proper security that I was supposed to have. Imagine that my anger, because it caused me to go out of business, at least in this venture, because someone convinced somebody else not to give me something so that I could be a competitor and a player in their marketplace. My emotion was anger. It wasn't even frustration, it was pure anger. And at the bottom of the anger emotional wheel actually is frustration. Then you move up to disgust. So I was literally disgusted right off the bat. And then I got directly into my anger. And my anger was so vivid that I couldn't even talk to people for about a few days. Now, granted, it was the business that lit the fire, but the emotion of anger is the same. So there wasn't a business anger, it was an actual anger at what the person did. So when it comes to understanding your emotions, and I do have a workbook on emotions and the wheel of emotions so that you can actually see where you might fit. And Tanya or Iris or Vikas, if one of you will remind me to send that to you so you can send that out to everyone, you'll see why anger is anger. It doesn't matter if it's based on business, if it's based on personal. If I look at your question from a different perspective by saying, how do I separate my anger when I'm in business versus my anger when I'm in person, that one is a little bit more complicated because I have to know more of the specifics. But suffice it to say that when you are angry, it does not matter about the business or whether it's personal, your brain does the same thing. There is a loss of connection, there is a loss of uncertainty, or there's a large amount of uncertainty. You lose your orientation and control. You are going to imbue large amounts of cortisol, epinephrine, adrenaline, and all of these things are going to drive your brain to the point where you can't even think straight. One of our upcoming series that I hope that all of you will take the time to attend is what's happening in your brain as a leader. Because for too long, we've tried to figure out what makes a great leader and how they do things and all this wonderful stuff. But we've never really talked about what's going on inside of a leader's brain and why leaders need to know what's happening inside of their employees' brain. When it comes to, again, business, your brain doesn't care because your brain doesn't separate business from pleasure. Anger is anger, frustration is frustration, disgust is disgust. What may trigger that's something else again. So if your trigger for anger was the business, okay, then that's fine. What you then have to do when you get home or when you get amongst your friends, you have to separate the trigger out. But that's a deeper conversation. I know we're coming up on time. Rajiv, how are we doing on time?
We
So Don, we have run out of
Thank you
time.
for the answer, sir.
I think Tanya had one last response to a question. So we will do Tanya's response and then wrap it up. Is that okay?
Sure, fine.
I just wanted to add, people are now habitual to work from home, and as they are very productive too. They're going to go back to workplace and start the work again. The groups of people and sense of fear amongst all special in current situation in a pandemic. What and how to control such brain brain thoughts. Quickly, one idea that I'd love all for you to explore is that just like any situation, it's a new pivot. And with every new pivot, there are new rules of engagement. And by bringing the team together where you have a discussion, how is that engagement? How anything else? So we have a new situation, new rules of engagement. And the last thing I want to leave you with is the idea of that words create realities. And about 2 weeks into the pandemic, I wrote an article on LinkedIn that said, I refuse to socially distance myself. I even tweeted our prime minister and said, I'm going to remain socially connected, but remain socially distanced. So I challenge you all to really observe your vocabulary and to stay socially connected, but physically distant so we can stay connected, continue building our relationships, but stay physically healthy.
Thank you for that, Tanya. Rajiv, we're going to turn it back over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Don. So, everyone, thank you so much for participating in our live webinar. Like I'd mentioned at the beginning, this was our fourth and last webinar, and I really appreciate Don, Iris, and Tanya for presenting today. So thank you so much. We are launching a certification program, and we will provide details on that. This is a certification program that Don will lead and will provide information about your certification to become a coach using NLP. So this information and a brochure on that, we will mail it out to you. We'll also put up on our website. If you're interested in becoming a certified coach and using NLP and brain-based techniques, this is your opportunity to do that. So with that, if there is nothing else, Iris, Don, or Tanya, we can wrap it up.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that this is not neuro-linguistic programming, that it's actually a neuroscience certificate. So there's a big difference between that and NLP.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.